Hello and welcome to the Survivals of Triumph show. Tonight is episode 7 with Marc Singer, all the way from Watford in England. So he's going to be telling us about his journey to hell and back and then some. And Marc was wrongly convicted of a crime that he did not commit. So he's here tonight to tell you his tale of survival to triumph. So over to you, Marc. Let us know about your special story.
Hi, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. So where do I start? It's probably at the beginning. Yeah. Generally, I had a good upbringing when I was young. But what happened, and this is like the short version leading up to it. What happened was, as a youngster, I got bullied quite badly at school, and then I sort of developed a set of beliefs and attitudes which led me into sort of a life where I went off the rails a little bit and ended up in a gang, football gang, after about the age of 15, 16. And for about 10 years, I was involved in all of that. It was good. There was positive sides to it, but there's also negative sides of it, such as violence, drug taking, that sort of thing. So I got in with the wrong crowd, and I got a bit of a reputation for myself, generally around the area, but also with the police. And so I was in and out of trouble, and that sort of stigmatized me for a while. But then what happened was, after being in trouble for a period of time, I got myself sorted, really, and started building my life up again, and got myself a job, started living pretty much a normal life. And the incident that led me to get convicted for something that I hadn't done was that it's basically, I don't like to sound like a victim or like talking about, oh, me, poor me, I'm an injustice or something like that, because the way I see what happened to me, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, was my own making, because basically I created the karma that led to me getting involved in that situation later on. I had a set of negative beliefs, attitudes, and I lived my life in a very stressful sort of reckless sort of way. I used to drink a lot, take drugs, things like that. And that created a mindset which invited that sort of stuff into my life. So fast forward on to the incident we're talking about tonight, where I was actually convicted of something I hadn't done. I was convicted in the past of things I had done, but like I said, I'd moved on from that part of my life. And by now, at this stage, I was in my mid-30s, and I'd started, I was working for a car dealership. I was quite successful for them. I was their number one salesperson. I was with a girl, and we were happy, and we were looking to move in together and all that sort of stuff. And it was like Christmas 2010, I think, yeah, 2010. And it was a work Christmas party. And so basically, I was really pushing myself very hard at work. I was working on 7 days a week, like 12-hour days, really pushing myself hard, because I was the top salesperson and I wanted to maintain that. So it meant working long hours and really pushing yourself hard. And that led me to develop a lot of stress, and my energy was low. And because my energy was low, I was always rushing around. I never got enough time to do the things I wanted to. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't eating healthy. I wasn't seeing my family as much as I wanted to. I wasn't seeing my girlfriend as much as I wanted to do it. But at the same time, I was going out and burning the candle when I did get the opportunity to, at both ends. So putting way too much pressure on myself. So that led me to be quite stressed. But anyway, I was managing it. So I thought. And then I ended up at a work Christmas party, and this work Christmas party was two groups of people. You had two different branches, and they happened to be rival branches. And that year, I was working for the Boreham Wood branch, which is near Watford, and the St Albans branch, which was our rivals, was also there. But they're the much bigger branch, and about 4 times the size of us, but we'd outperform them. And me in particular, I'd outperformed 2 or 3 of their salespeople. So there was a lot of animosity between the two groups to start with. But our group, which was much smaller than theirs, we all turned up with our girlfriends. They all turned up with just blokes, and they'd all been drinking all day, and we hadn't. We'd just finished work. And the incident that led to me getting arrested was actually nothing to do with me whatsoever. it was between a young lad who was working for our branch. He's only 18, and these 4 guys who was working for the other branch. And what happened was my girlfriend during the course of the evening had become friends or chatty with this young lad's girlfriend. And at this time when he was in the toilet, I think, and he got attacked by these 4 guys for something. And the fight broke out between this. And at this time, I wasn't there. I was somewhere else in this hotel. It was like in a conference room sort of thing. And this was like outside in the corridor. And during that pit fight where this young kid got attacked, my girlfriend happened to be there with his girlfriend chatting or whatever. And the girlfriend of the young lad got involved and had an asthma attack. And so my girlfriend ended up getting involved and basically trying to help her. And in the process had to go at these guys, just told them all animals or something along those lines. And anyway, that ended, that fight finished. And someone come and told me something had happened. So I'd gone outside the front of the hotel because that's where my girlfriend and the other 2, the young lad and his girlfriend, had gone after the fight. So I headed out there and I was told what had happened. And I walked back into the hotel. And when I walked back into the hotel, these 4 guys confronted me over what my girlfriend had said to them. And I was quite argumentative, admittedly, but and that led, again, this is another reason why I don't see myself as a victim so much, but that led me to being attacked by these 4 guys, and I was subsequently beaten up quite badly. I ended up in hospital for 2 weeks. I had broken ribs, my hand was broken, my face was like a balloon, my nose was bust, everything. I just got a real bad pasting. And I was in a very bad way, and I was blacking out for about 2 weeks as well. But during that fight, my girlfriend apparently came in, and I'd passed out by now. I didn't know what was going on. I was being beaten up on the floor. And it was that bad that apparently she thought I was going to get killed. The fight got stopped, or it stopped somehow. I don't know who stopped it. But I mean, I got brought around, and I was being brought around by 2 nurses who happened to be there on an NHS night out sort of thing. And they were putting me on a chair and they were bringing me around. And when next thing I know, there was police officers there and they arrested me for that, and for GBH. And so that I was shocked, to say the least, because I hadn't actually done anything, nothing that they'd accused me of anyway. I was arguing with the guy, but not in a fight. And the last thing I remember was getting put into a headlock by this guy and wrestling with him to get him off me, but then falling to the floor, and then him laying on top of me and punching me. And I passed out because he had me in a head choke. And that's the last thing I remember. And so then that, like I said, I got arrested for that. And at the time, it was clear that I'd been beaten up. So obviously I went to hospital. It took them 2 weeks before they could interview me because of the state I was in. And I was asking them, obviously I was not happy about being arrested. I pressed charges on the 4 guys who attacked me, and they never got arrested, these 4 guys. And my mother at the time was phoning the police every day, asking why they hadn't been arrested yet, what's going on. And whilst that was all going on, and by this time, no one had been charged, because obviously I hadn't even been interviewed at this point. The company I worked for did an internal investigation, and they interviewed everybody who was working in the branch, and loads of people did statements, but not many people said anything really of note. Most of the people, in fact, didn't want anything to do with it. And so anyway, it was 2 or 3 weeks. I think it was 2 or 3 months later after the incident. No, it was February. Yeah, February. The incident happened in December, and I got charged in February. So nearly 3 months later. With the assault, which shocked me anyway, because I wasn't expecting to get charged, because obviously I haven't done it. And the thing that sprung to mind, though, is because in the past I have been involved in fights and stuff like that, and I have been convicted of stuff like that in the past. So it was clear to me why I was getting arrested for this, because it's easy to work out. If you look at someone's past and you say, well, look, he's done that in the past, therefore he's done it now. It's an easy, anyone can put two together and come up with 5. So that's essentially what was going on in this situation. So, but even still, I was clear in my mind that I hadn't done it. I knew that I hadn't done it. And I was also confident that justice would prevail. The there was no evidence that would back them up other than like these guys, 4 guys who beat me up. It's their word against mine, so to speak. There was no independent witnesses. There was no forensics. There was no CCTV. The only thing actually they did have, which was of any use, was an independent a waiter filmed it on his camera, and that showed me getting beaten up. So that disappeared.
Wow.
That disappeared. And so we didn't get to find that, even though we tried to find that. That never came to light. So I ended up in court, and this was a long time later. So it takes a while to get to court, obviously. So it's about a year or so later. And the stress and everything, obviously, that causes for everybody is unbelievable. Families, people around you, my girlfriend, everybody. And so eventually I did get to court. I think it was by the time I got to court, it was November 2011, so virtually a year later. So in court, the court case was going how I expected it to go at first, because I just thought, look, the evidence will prevail, show that I didn't do anything. It was clear that I got beaten up. My girlfriend, I had witnesses on my side who backed my side of the story up. And it was simply their word against mine, basically. There was, like I said, there was no independent witnesses or CCTV to show their side of the story. Yeah. So in my eyes, it was a no-brainer that they shouldn't find you guilty for this. So, and in court, it came to light that the police officer in charge of the case was under a lot of pressure because he'd been suspended for cocaine abuse previously. And that was something I only found out during the court case. Anyway, so during that court case, all of a sudden, the police subpoena, they brought up 3 girls who worked for the St Albans branch. And it was during cross-examination by my barrister that they was asking them questions, and they didn't seem to know anything about the case. They were like not under, their questions weren't, they were like, I don't know what happened or whatever. They didn't seem to know anything. So when my barrister said, well, you said this in your statement, but what you're saying now is you didn't see that or this or whatever. So it was just contradicting everything. Yeah. And one of them said, well, I actually didn't write a statement, so I don't know what statement you're talking about. And my barrister turned around and said, well, I've got a statement here in my hands. And she goes, no, I never wrote. And then it was then at that point that he noticed that they weren't signed. And what happened is the police officer had put in 3 unsigned forged statements into the bundle, which is illegal, obviously. It was at that point we tried to get the case thrown out, and all 3 of their evidence had been heard, even though their evidence didn't say much. The judge actually said, no, he's going to keep the case going. And we, just told the jury to forget what they'd heard or whatever. So we got to the point where it came to, it looked like I was going to win. And the jury were looking over at me, and you could see people like smiling or whatever. And, you just get a feeling that, things are going okay and everything looks all right. Because, like I said, the evidence was very much not there. There was no evidence to prove their point of what they were trying to say I did, which was just a load of nonsense, basically. They're saying I was like a madman and I attacked them. And they're just trying to paint that picture of something that I didn't do. Don't get me wrong. In the past, I have done things like that. So this is why I'm saying I'm not a victim. This is why they've tried to tie the 2 together. But in this situation, I certainly wasn't guilty of what they said I was doing. Definitely not. And they were just trying to paint a picture. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to tie the 2 cases together with my past. Sorry, the cases together with my past. And so what happened was the turning point in that trial was when they realized that they weren't going to win through the evidence, the police or the prosecution, that they then submitted my past to the jury. And you could see it, the attitude completely changed instantly. And again, like I just said a minute ago, it's a normal, rational human nature response. And I think I would have done the same. If you're sitting in front of someone and they're telling you they're not guilty of something, and then someone turns around and says, but hang on, this guy did this and he did that 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whenever it was, you naturally are going to doubt that guy. You're going to start thinking, well, actually, maybe he did do it. And that's what happened. I mean, it's essentially what happened. And so I can understand it in a way. but it's still not justice because you're meant to be get found guilty or not guilty for what you're doing, not what you did 20 years ago. So, and again, this is why I say I don't see myself as the victim. I see myself as my own, I created that karma by the stuff that I did in the past, by not dealing with those attitudes and beliefs that led up to that point. And had I done that at an earlier stage, then the argument wouldn't have happened in the first place, because I would have dealt with it in a much more constructive and productive way to begin with. I wouldn't have even approached the people in the first place. And not only that, if you look back at the work situation, I would have been not as stressed. I would have been managing myself better. My work-life balance would have been better, and so on. So I wouldn't have allowed myself to get into that sort of mindset where I was drinking and taking drugs and things like that, which created that sort of stress, that mindset in the first place. So I can't blame anyone out other than myself for that. So long story short, I got convicted, and because I'd been convicted of the things in the past, they had a law, or a sentence, I should say, called IPP, and the IPP is indeterminate public protection. And what that means is that anybody who's convicted of either a violent or it was actually brought out for sexual crimes back in the 90s, but it was spread out for anyone who does violence and stuff like that as well, or anything threatening, maybe not necessarily violence, anything that can be deemed as violent. And it was rolled out for people who have done things in the past but may have done it again or reoffended. So they gave me this IPP sentence, and essentially that's a life sentence with no release date, because they give you the sentence with a minimum time you've got to serve. It's a very bare minimum. Very few people get out on the tariff date, which is what it's called, which is the minimum. Most people end up serving a lot longer, decades longer in some cases. And it's impossible to get out. Well, it used to be. They've changed the law now, but it used to be impossible to get out because the criteria was that you had to prove that you will never reoffend again. And if you're going to you look at it rationally, how can you prove to anybody you're never going to do something again? I can tell you all day long that I'm never going to do it again, but you can't prove that. So it's impossible to prove that you will never do something. And so that was the problem. So a lot of people were, all IPPs were going in front of, they've done everything they'd been asked to do. They were pro-social, everything was good, but they weren't getting out because of that reason. And I was told that I was at that early stage when I first went to prison, that I was never, ever going to get out of prison. That was the first day. And that, I should forget any ideas of it, even trying to, get out of jail. And my mum was told that as well at the earliest stage when in the court. And so, I went to prison thinking that I was never getting out of jail and not knowing if I'd ever see my family again, which, as it turned out, I didn't outside in the free world. But that's not because I didn't get out. But so what happened was, there was other guys in there who were serving similar sentences, and they all had the same mindset that they're never getting out of jail. But even from that very early start, I had this mindset where I thought, I am getting out, and I'll make sure I'm getting out. And that one of the ways you do that in there with an IPP is you've got to prove that you're not a risk to society, and you prove that by doing course after course after course of what's called offending behaviour courses. I appealed the sentence, I appealed the conviction, both got rejected. And I was told at the earlier stage that unless you admit to the whole thing, basically, you'll never get out. You can't, if you say that you're not guilty of something, they won't let you out, simple as that. So that was one of the hardest things to deal with, is the fact that I was, I knew I hadn't done it, and I had to admit to something that I hadn't done. So that's why I'll tell you now about the mindset of having to look at it from a perspective of seeing it as I'm the one who created that situation, rather than being an injustice, rather than seeing myself as a victim. Because if I'd have continued along those lines, which I did at first, I was feeling very victimized at the beginning. But if I'd have continued down that line, then I probably wouldn't have gone out. I had to sort of accept responsibility for it of myself instead of seeing myself as a victim. So I did that. I chose to do that. I spun it on its head and I said, well, look, I'm here because of me, not because of anyone else. And that's the way I dealt with it. And otherwise it would just drive you absolutely potty in there. You know, you would go insane. And people do go insane serving IPPs. There's one guy I know in there who's been in there 18 years for a threatening phone call. And that's how crazy that sentence was. But thankfully, the law eventually got overturned. 2 years before, I ended up serving 6 years in there in total, which was my tariff. But the actual sentence got overturned in, a year before I got out, thankfully. But it was before then that my life actually changed, because what happened was, as I was working really non-stop to try and change, to just demonstrate that I wasn't a risk or anything like that. And that by doing course after course, anger management, therapeutic courses, all sorts of thinking skill, all sorts of different courses. I think I've done about 30 odd in total. Wow. And it's a lot of courses. And but after 2 years, and I was actually in a very good state of mind at that point. I was exercising, I was in the gym every day or working and doing all stuff that was good, positive. And that's when I found out my mum was ill with cancer. And this was just before Christmas 2013. And it was 2 weeks after her diagnosis that she died. And that was a massive, I don't know about shock, but it was a shock. Yeah. But I mean, it was just that it came out of the blue, really. I didn't expect it, you know, and obviously my mum was like my rock. She was like my, you know, the person I was closest to in the world, you know, but crazily before that. And I'm a massive animal lover and I love cats. And when I went to prison, I had 21 cats and there's a lot of cats.
21 cats, Mark, my God.
You haven't heard the rest of it yet. Well, by the time, I'll come to this in a minute about how many was left when all of that happened. But yeah, one of those cats, and some people laugh at this sort of thing. Other people understand it. Anyone who's an animal lover will realize that animals aren't just animals; they're part of your family, and you love them as much as anything. You know, you love them just as much as your kids or whoever. They are your kids in a lot of people's eyes. So siblings or whatever. So you see them as family members. And I loved all of my animals, but I had one particular one who was like my baby, and she would never left my side. And she was a really, really intelligent animal. And like, anyway, so it was obviously evident that she missed me. She knew I wasn't there. And every time I phoned my mum, she'd put her on the phone and I'd talk to her, and you could hear her, you know, she'd be listening and everything. But there was nothing, she wasn't ill or anything like that. But then when my mum got ill, my mum collapsed on, I think it was the 30th of November. No, the 8th. No, I'm just trying to think. You know, she went to hospital on the 8th of December. She was rushed to hospital, taken in an ambulance. And that was when she collapsed and she couldn't cope. And they diagnosed her around the same time. And she died on the 21st of December. But on the 20th of December, by now my mum's in a coma in hospital, and I'd spoken to her a couple of times, but she couldn't speak. She lost the power to talk. She was falling asleep. And I was trying to talk to her on the phone for like 5 minutes you get on the phone in there, because you don't get long on the phone. You know, it's not like you have hours. It's not like here where you just. And so I was like literally queuing the phone, and then you get on the phone and all you've got is people screaming and shouting in the background, doors banging and everything else like that. So it's not like you can have a nice, pleasant conversation either. You know, you've got to block all of that out and try and listen. And so anyway, I'm talking to, you know, I phoned my dad in the morning on the 20th of December, expecting the worst news about my mum, only to find my dad crying. And he was crying. I obviously assumed it was my mum. And he said, Tipsy's died. And that was my cat. And it threw me. It completely threw me totally. I was not expecting it. And I just went, I couldn't respond. I just couldn't talk. I had to hang up the phone. And I went back to the phone. I just couldn't get my head around it. And the next morning at 11 a.m. I phoned and my mum died. Oh, so it was 2 days running. The two most loved females in my life died that next to each other. So I had to get my head around that. And I was at that time, I was in a period because it was low staff as well. So we were on 24-hour bang up as well. So for 6 months on end, which is why people moan about COVID. I had to deal with worse. But so 24-hour bang up, literally out of the cell for 30 minutes to get your food. You had one shower a week. One shower a week. That's what we were having on that. For 6 months, I had to live like that in there.
Oh, sorry.
Huh?
I didn't mean to interrupt. It just shocked me then.
Oh, I thought the link went off or something.
No, I was just shocked. You said 6 months of.
Yeah, no, 6 months. We lived like that because they had no staff, and because they had mass staff cuts, so for 6 months we were all living like that during that period. But thankfully, the staff that were there were brilliant for me. They were really good to me. They'd come and let me out of the cell to make phone calls. They understood my situation and what I was having to deal with. So they were trying to help me as much as possible. So, they leave my door open like when everyone else is locked up, in case I wanted to just get out and have a walk or something like that. So they were helpful in a lot of ways. And that I had to arrange the funeral from there. And because my dad was in a bad way at this time, he'd sort of mentally gone to pieces. Couldn't cope with anything, and I had friends outside trying to help and support, but it just wasn't helping. And so I had to arrange all the funeral from the prison and be escorted there. But the craziest thing, actually, it just popped into my mind just now. I had an option. I was given an option when my mum was in her last days in hospital. She was in a coma, and the office. I applied. Obviously to go and see her. Because you can get like compassionate leave, but with an officer to go, they go with you to go and see. And he come in and say, well, you've been cleared. This is 2 days or 3 days before she died. You've been cleared to go and see her. But there's one thing you've got to consider. If you can either go now and see your mum, or you can go to the funeral. You can't do two.
On the way.
So I had to choose between either going to see my mum one more time or going to her funeral. And considering I had to arrange the funeral, because I knew at that time I would have to, I had to choose funeral. So I phoned my dad that day straight away. I said, what shall I do? And he said, look, she's in a coma. She's not going to even know you're there. So I had to choose. I had to choose to go to the funeral and not see my mum one more time, sort of thing. And in a way, I'm glad I did, because I didn't really want to see her in that state. I didn't want my last memory of her to be sat there in a hospital bed, but it would still, at the other part of me tells myself that had I seen her, she might have heard or something like that. She might have been noticed me there. And it was ironic that the day after I made that decision, I think it was, that she died, or 2 days after or something like that. And so, yeah, in a way, I felt like she was waiting for me to come and say goodbye, but it is what it is, and you can't change that. So, like I said, I had to arrange everything. So, and this was in the December, right over Christmas.
Yeah, God.
It weren't my best Christmas. Luckily, I was on a very, like I said, it was a high security jail at the time, full of lifers, full of the most dangerous people on paper you'd expect, but also some of the most kindest people you'd ever meet. And everyone rallied together to help me. It doesn't matter what faith, color, background, whatever, they're all helping me in every way. I had the top traveling guy, like the main man of the travelers, ironing my suit the day of the funeral. So, he's like this big revered guy who we're all scared of, and he was ironing my suit. So things like that. So I had a lot of like good relationships in there, respect with people, because I got on well with everybody really. And so everyone sort of rallied together. And in jail, it's probably the most feared thing for any prisoner to lose someone really close to you. So people could understand they could relate to it or empathize with what you're going through. But anyway, the prison after that in January moved me to a prison which was closer to my home, so that I could have visits from my dad. And that was in February. And they moved in February. I did, and he visited me once. Friends brought him up, and he was skin and bones by this stage. He wasn't eating. He was on medication for a thyroid condition that she wasn't taking. He was lying to me, saying that he was, and he wasn't. One of the last things my mum said to me on the phone before I stopped talking to her was, make sure your father takes his medication. And I was asking him, but he just wasn't. And there was no way of really getting him to do anything. He just gave up, I think. The house was in absolute state by now, because the 21 cats had multiplied into something like 74 cats. because it just got complete. See, my mum was not well before prison. Her legs, she had a bad sciatic nerve. She couldn't walk. She wasn't in very good health. She was working non-stop. She was a highly paid. She was the top 5 financial advisor in the country. So she was very highly paid, but she couldn't move. She couldn't go out. She couldn't even do anything. And so her health deteriorated very rapidly after I went to prison. And I blame myself in some ways for that, obviously. And and also my father was in a bad state as well. So the house got into some sort of disrepair and state, and the cat issue just grew out of control. They couldn't control it. They couldn't get rid of all the cats. And my mum actually said to me at some point, she was hoarding the cats to replace the fact that I wasn't there.
Oh,
so it was like a comfort for her in a way. She was like mothering all these cats, yeah. And even though I was driving them mad myself to get rid of them, they wouldn't do it. Well, they tried, but they couldn't. They couldn't afford to get them spayed. So every time they had more litters, they'd multiply and so on. It got out of control. So long story short, so my dad came up and saw me in prison, and my friends, and that was in February. And when I went to that prison, they put me on the worst possible wing they could have put me on. I think they did it to test me because they knew I was an IPP. And if you're going to test an IPP to see if they go mad or not, you put them on the worst wing. So they put me on a wing which they used to be called Beirut. It's just constantly kicking off on there every 5 seconds, like violence, shouting, non-stop, everything. And I had to hold that down. I just lost my mum, just moved to a new jail, and I'm trying to hold myself together in a prison which is just full of lunatics kicking off every 5 seconds. And it was in the March, exactly 3 months to the day after my mum died, that I was on the phone to my dad one morning, and he dropped down dead as I was talking to him on the phone. He had a cardiac arrest and literally died as I was talking to him on the phone. And the craziest thing is what I said to him. I phoned him. It was 11:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and he said he couldn't barely speak because he was obviously having a heart attack. And he said to me, "Mark, I think I'm dying." And I said, "You can't die. Who's going to feed the cats?" That's the last thing I ever said to him. What a thing to say. And, I look back and think, why didn't I say I love you or something like that? But that's what you just say these things, you don't think. And so anyway, the phone went dead, and I phoned my friend, who the only person I knew thought to phone was my ex-girlfriend, who was a real good support to me when my mum died. We were still friends, and I phoned her and just said, I went to answer phone, and I said, I think my dad's died. Can you get round there? And then I had to be banged up. It was at 12 o'clock. I was locked up, so they put me back in the cell, and I had no idea what was going on. And that day, I had a visit from a friend at 2 p.m. And it was about 1 p.m. The door opened and an officer walked in and said, the prison chaplain is going to meet you in the visiting hall at 2 o'clock. So I knew then. And my friend Lucy and her husband turned up, and my friend Spencer turned up, and the chaplain turned up. And the police were called. They had to kick the door in, and found my dad collapsed at the top of the stairs and died, obviously. So again, I had to deal with all the same stuff as what happened with my mum. I had to keep my head together. I had to deal with the prisons, the funeral, and then on top of that, I had to deal with the house. I had to get the house cleaned out. I had to get the cats all rehomed, which broke my heart because they were like babies to me, with the ones I knew anyway. And the house had to go on the market because it was mortgaged up. I had to sell it. And it was 6 months later, in November, was it 6 months? Yeah, November, that my final immediate member of my family died. It was my grandfather. He was 97. Okay. And he died of pneumonia, which was sort of expected in a way, as he was 97, but no less of a painful thing. Yeah. But so in that 1 year, I lost 31 things, people, animals that I loved pretty much my whole life. So it was a bit of a mad year. And
my goodness. It's funny you can laugh about it now.
Well, I laugh, but I because you can't change it. There's no point feeling, it is what it is. It's life. you know, we all lose people, but I mean, it is what it is. I have a very open-minded view of life anyway. I mean, I don't see death as the end and things like that. I have a very strong viewpoint. They all live on with me. They all continue in my heart, in my soul, in my mind, and everything I do. So, you know, it's life. We all move, we all die at some point. It's just life. So there's no point being morbid about it. You just got to get on with it. And you know, so I do. That's how I see life. I don't spend my life worrying about things and stressing over things in the past. I try and live in the moment, live my life, and be as happy as I can right now. So, but yeah, I mean, the straw that really broke the camel's back in that situation, because for that whole year I held it together, and I had to, because of all the stuff I had to deal with. And luckily, it was because I had such good friends outside. Because if it wasn't for those support of the close, sort of certain close friends, I should say, because funny enough, when you're in prison, the people you expect to be there aren't, and the people you never thought would be there are. It's really weird how it turns out. That's life, I suppose. Some real close friends just disappeared, and some people who I hadn't seen in years turned up out of the blue and suddenly started supporting me. And so anyway, it was a year later, after all of that had happened. I was by now I was progressing quite well. I was doing all right. I thought I was on the surface, because what I did is I blocked out the emotional aspect of it to get through the days and deal with it all. And I was working and everything, but hadn't dealt with the emotional aspect of it. So I got to a point where I got moved onto what's called an open wing, right, which is where you've got a lot more freedom and you're a lot more trusted, like the super enhanced wings where the trusted prisoners go. It's a small wing, but it's you've got your own key to the door, and the rooms are nicer, and you can cook and everything else like that. So it's a much nicer sort of environment. And I was on there, and I phoned my friend to tell her, the same friend who was supporting me with my parents and that, just tell her the good news. I'd been moved to this new wing, and she said, "I've got something to tell you." And I was like, "Right, okay." And she goes, "Yeah, my ex-girlfriend," and this happened to be probably the only person who I still had any sort of love in my heart for, still in a close sort of sense. Yeah. Even though we weren't together, I mean, I never wanted to get back with her. Christ no. But the reason I had that sort of connection with her is because there was a bond there, I felt. Yeah. And because I felt that bond was there was a connection there still. And she told me that she was now with my best friend. Oh. So that sort of just sent me on a real spiral. It was like all the things that had happened that you would have thought would have sent me on a spiral. That was the thing that sent me over the edge. And I ended up taking an overdose. And that I just couldn't. I just went to pot, and my mindset just collapsed overnight. And it was like a stack of cards had been built up, and suddenly it all just collapsed. And I took an overdose, and luckily, because I was on this open wing, which is open. If it had been on another wing, I'd be dead. Wow. The doors are open sometimes, and you can open other people. You can go and see your friends and like just turn the key and go in their cell or door in the room. Whereas you wouldn't be able to do that on a normal wing. You get banged up and that's it. Right. So in this wing, friends can come and visit you and have a cup of tea with you or whatever. And lucky that night I'd collapsed, and my friend come to see me, opened the door, found me on the floor, and gave me CPR. Wow. And saved my life. And that sort of like that. I had to go back. I went to the healthcare the next day. I had to tell them fibs. I hope no one else sees this, because they might do me for it now, but not probation or anything. But they don't even know about this part of it yet. But I've kept this secret. But no, I had to lie and say that I took it was a nasal spray that I had what's the word? What's it? I can't remember when you go into shock. I can't remember the word now. Anaphylactic shock.
Like
that's it. And I told them that's what had happened, because I was scared that if they found out I'd had an overdose, they'd knock me back down to the crap wings, basically, and I'd have to start again, and I would never get out of prison. And all the good work that I'd done up to that point would get thrown out the window, and I'd end up back at square one. So everyone was saying to me, "You've got to go and tell them. You've got to go and tell them." And I was like, I can't. So anyway, I lied to them about that, but I went to hospital. and they gave me tests, and I was backwards and forwards for about a year, having different type tests, and eventually I was given the all clear. And it took me about a year to start getting my health back to normal levels, because I was in a very, very bad way for about a year, health wise. It took a long time. But what I did, that was the turning point for me. And that was the point where I just decided no longer was I going to be a victim to anything. And I wanted to take control of my life, and I was going to get myself out of jail. And so I took control, and I started doing everything I could possibly to get out. Up to that point, I was working in a warehouse in the prison. Yeah. And I started getting a job working in the prison education department, working with kids teaching them critical reasoning skills. I did that for 2 years. I started doing a degree. I was working mentoring young kids from gangs and stuff like that. And during that time, I did a business a course. And one of the things they asked me to do is to tell them I had to do a business plan. And they asked me to come up with an idea, like a potential career. And I said, like life coach, just out of the blue, like that. Wow. And it was the first thing that came into my mind. I don't know where it came from. And they said part of the course, what I was doing, I had to research it and find out all about it and everything. Okay. So I did that in the limited resources that we had. And it turned out all the skills and attributes that lend itself to being a good life coach, I had. And so I thought it sort of planted a seed. And that was where it all began, really, the coaching. And so it wasn't, it lay dormant for a while. I ended up getting myself out, but that was after probably about 4 years, and I got out after 2 years. And then I had to start all afresh. I mean, it was that was it. I mean, after the 6 years, when I was in prison, I was really popular. Everyone knew me. All the officers, all the inmates, everyone loved me, basically. Everyone respected me because of what I'd been through. I was like, they were like, bloody hell, I don't know if I could have done what you did. You had these big tough guys telling you that. And all these gangsters and murderers and God knows what telling you how tough you are. And but I had that sort of respect in there because I got on with everybody. I was that sort of guy. And so I was on a high in a way because I felt comfortable there. I was there 3 years in that jail. And by the time I got out, it was like sad in a way because you're leaving all the people you built good, strong relationships with. And lots of them I still talk to today. But anyway, I got out and it was just crazy. I can't explain it. It was just weird. I mean, it was just everything I ever knew had gone. My whole life had disappeared, basically. I was back living in my aunt and uncle's annex for 3 months when I first come out. And I was never particularly close with them in the beginning, but they'd become closer after my parents died. Yeah. So they helped me a lot. And, without them, it would have been a lot harder, especially getting out because they gave me somewhere to stay. Yeah. But that first 3 months, I was in a tiny little room, no TV. It was actually better in prison. I'm not going to lie. That the comfort side of it was non-existent, and I felt just so lonely and cut off. It was horrible, and I just didn't know where to turn. I just didn't know. I had no job. I had no. All my friends and everybody I knew had moved on or had families and kids and everything else now. So it wasn't like I was going out with everybody, not drinking or seeing different people. So it was just like it was really, really strange. I had no home, no job, nothing. So for about a year, I realized that I had to deal with my own emotional mind aspect and all the stuff that had gone on. And that was my cue to do so, really. And it was difficult. That year was horrible. It was really horrible. I started going to Reiki. I had counseling, I had therapy, and none of it really helped me. I mean, the Reiki did a bit, but it was just trying to clear up that negative energy and the energy, the emotional side of it and the trauma and everything else, come to terms with that. And it wasn't until I had coaching I tried coaching that I realized that this is it. And because that was the only thing that really empowered me, made me feel good about myself. The rest of it just focused on all the past and negative stuff and, the reasons why this happened and stuff. I already knew the reasons why it happened because I'd done all the courses in prison. Yeah. So I knew the roots of my negative beliefs, my negative attitudes and things like that. And I dealt with that. I dealt with all of those sort of things. So I didn't need to delve back into that. I wanted to move forward and started really building my life. And it was when I found coaching that I decided that, you know, this is going to work for me. And it was at that point that I thought, you know what, this is what I want to do. And my life was going nowhere. I didn't have a job. I didn't really know which direction my life was going to go in. I felt like my life was over. And so I took the risk, and it wasn't a risk. It was having faith. And I was going to just get one of these courses you get online. And it was actually the coach I had. She said to me, and she actually wasn't that highly trained, to be fair to her. She said to me, Mark, if you're going to do it properly. Go and find the best school you can find and invest in it. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And I went on the ICF website, and I found, I researched a few different courses, and I found IPEC, which is the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. And I invested something like 15 grand into it. And it was just crazy money. And but I was in such a state mentally at the time. I just sort of sod it. I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how it would turn out. I had no idea if I was making a balls up or whatever. And I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And 2 years later, I qualified as a professional coach, and the skills and the philosophy, I should say, and the skills, but the philosophy and the way of being that they taught me changed my life from the inside out. And it's also now what I use to, you know, obviously work with clients and help them and do the same with them. And it is a specific process that I use, and it's called the core energy coaching process. And that's essentially what I now work and live by. And it keeps me, don't get me wrong, there's days where I feel like crap and, you know, whatever, but that's human nature.
Yeah, we all get those.
That's human nature. I mean, I've had this before. People say, oh, you're a coach. How come you're not like, you know, you should be happy all the time. It doesn't work like that. We're human beings.
It's thrown at us, isn't it?
That's why coaches have coaches.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
you know, this is true, because you know, if you want to be at your best, you need someone to hold you accountable to do so and do the work. So but yeah, essentially that's what I do, and that's how it ended up. I mean, that's how I got to the point where I am now, working as a professional coach through that very bizarre sort of journey.
That is incredible. And my gosh, what a story. And like you said before we even come on, we could literally talk about this for 3
I could talk about forever.
You could have a Netflix.
I'm going to plug my book though, because
you could have a Netflix series. We'll plug the book in a minute, but seriously, you could have a this could be a series, couldn't it, that you can watch?
Well, the film's bound to come at some point. This is the thing, you see. This is the thing with the philosophy. It's about manifesting your reality, isn't it? and I'm creating reality. Listen, I'll be honest with you. When I started as a coach, I had no idea I'd be doing some of the stuff I'm doing now. I thought, yeah, okay, I'll be coaching people. That's what we all think when we start becoming a coach. But I never thought I'd be doing speaking events. I never thought I'd be writing a book. I never thought I'd be writing articles. I never thought I'd be doing podcasts. I never thought I'd have my own podcast, which I'm doing next week. I never thought I'd be doing a live show. All of these weird things that keep snowballing, all come out of opportunities and seeing opportunities and taking those opportunities. And then another door. I got an award for turning my life around from the local it was the who was he? The Sheriff of Hertfordshire.
Wow.
So crazy things like this keep happening.
You've totally turned your life around. You said at the start you were in a gang. You were in a
gang. Yeah. I mean, again, that's all going to be in the book. I was actually funny enough, I spent a whole chunk of my life focused on building a persona. And funny enough, it ties in with what I do now as a coach, because it's all about how we psychologically create the life that we want. Now, we can either do that good in a positive way, or we can do it in a negative way. If you psychologically create an image and then become that image, that's what you become. You become the reality. You become whatever you believe you are or think you are. And now I'm creating what I want in a positive sense. However, back then I was creating a negative sort of lifestyle, because I created this. I knew when I left school, I didn't want to be bullied anymore, and I wanted to fit in with this crowd of lads. And in those days, I saw what I now know is fear, but I thought then it was respect with my older peers. And I thought, I want some of that. And I want to be the main man. I want to be really cool. I want to be like everyone I walk in a pub and everyone's like, who's that geezer? You know, that sort of thing. And so what I did is I created an image. I created a mindset, a persona of who I wanted to be. I become it in a lot of ways. I mean, like this nutter. Like I said, I was doing drugs and things like that. And if you ask a lot of people who knew me back then, they swear blind I was a complete lunatic. I'm not. I've never been a lunatic. But that's the image I put out because that's what I wanted people to think. And it helped me in a lot of ways because I was never a good fighter.
Yeah.
And you know, but what I did is I used to put fear into people's minds because if I was in a fight, I would convince whoever I was having a fight with that I was a complete nutter. And then that person wouldn't want to fight me. And most of the time that worked, but on occasion it didn't. But yeah, and that's what I did. And you create the image that you want to be. And it's the same as anything. You know, that was a negative thing, a negative example. But if you want to create the image of a perfect life, there's nothing stopping you doing that either.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do now, what I am doing now with my life.
Yeah. Mark, it's so interesting. I've just got a comment on what you were saying about being bullied and creating this hard, like we call it like the hard man, man, isn't it? The hard guy for respect. And you know what? The psychological side of that is basically, it was out of fear, wasn't it? Is you just wanted, it's self-preservation.
Totally.
It's self-preservation.
Not wanting to be made to look a fool, basically.
Yeah, you wanted to protect yourself. Isn't that crazy? And I think a lot of people who get into the gang,
it is exactly
gang
that
mentality is that, and with the knife crime and everything, it's all about self-preservation, and it's done out of fear.
It's so misunderstood in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of these young kids I used to mentor in prison, young kids from gangs in London, really, really, they're young kids. I mean, I was quite old when I went in, but these are young kids, 18, 19, 20, and they're doing life sentences for killing people. And when you talk to them, I mean, if you didn't know, if you just saw them in the newspaper, you think, oh, look at them scumbags, monsters, whatever. Talk to them, they're really articulate, really intelligent, bright kids.
Yeah.
And that's because they've just got in the wrong crowd. They've gone down the wrong road. Very clever, artistic kids. But when they're in a group, they're all gangsters and they're talking like tough and all of that. But you get them on their own, they're really clever kids. And that's what I was good at because I broke the ice. Because I was, a lot of these kids, they didn't interact well with authority. So that's where I came in because at first they just saw me, a lot of these are black young kids, right? And they just saw me, this white guy with glasses, and they thought, oh, look at him, he's in for fraud or something like that.
Yeah.
And they actually started respecting me when they found out that I was in a gang and I was into violence in a crazy way. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's
relate to it, isn't it? You could relate. You had something
exactly.
They understood.
They saw that I was an authority, you know, oh, he's one of us, sort of thing. And that broke the barriers down. So once I got those barriers broken down, then I could start teaching them. I was getting in their heads and actually having a bit of banter with them, joking around with them, but at the same time teaching them. Yeah. And there was one guy, I'll give you an example, a funny story. He was a huge guy, about 6'8", big muscular guy, right? And my teacher who I used to work for, we had a class of about 14 people and he wouldn't move. He had his head on the table. He wouldn't move, wouldn't interact with anybody. And she said to me, look, Mark, he's going to have to go. This is on the second day. He's not doing it. He's actually, distracting the rest of the class. So I said to him, and I've always had a bit of a strange mental sense of humor, which anyone who knows me will testify to. I said, give me a minute, give me a day with him and I'll see how I'll get him out of his shell. So I went up to him and he wouldn't move. He come across as this really fearsome guy and no one would talk to him. Everyone was scared of him. And I just went up and whispered in his ear, what would you do if a Sherman tank suddenly come through that wall at 500 miles per hour? Just a random stupid comment. And he just went, what? Like that, and looked at me like, what the hell did you just say? And he burst out laughing. And because it burst out laughing, it broke that ice.
Yeah.
And I got him then. Because then once I got him out of his shell, he opened up. And do you know why he wasn't interacting? It wasn't because he was this big tough guy, because he had a stammer. And he didn't want to be seen as an idiot and laughed at. And it's what you just said there, fear. It all comes down to fear of embarrassment, fear of being shown up, fear of not being good enough.
Yeah.
And this is what holds a lot of us back in life and
Absolutely.
stops us moving forward. And we create these barriers and these images to prevent ourselves getting hurt.
Yeah.
And they're the things that stop us moving forward as well.
Yeah, and can lead
So,
us
yeah.
down the wrong path, isn't it? Right, we've got 5 minutes, Mark.
It's gone well quick, isn't it? I told you I talk too much.
I told you it would go quick. So have a sip of water.
Yeah, I need it.
When you start talking, I'm going to have a sip of water. So the book is the title of this show, right?
Yeah, To Hell and Back and Then Some is my book.
Love it. So when's it coming out?
I've just signed up with a publisher, and we're aiming at December. I wanted it to be sooner, but I've got to write the thing first. But I'm halfway through it, so it's going to be written by. He's putting pressure on me now, so it's going to be December. The ebook's going to come out first, then the written book, and then the audio book, which I'm narrating as well, so you can get to listen to my voice again.
I love your accent. It's Portuguese, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
So you can look forward to that. I mean, what I will say is, I mean, I'm going to start doing pre-sales soon of it, actually, and through my mailing list. So if anybody listening wants to actually look at that, check that out, get in touch and join my mailing list, and then you can pre-order one of my books.
So Mark, how can they get on your mailing list?
Well, I'll give you my mailing list, the link or whatever you want to put, and you can stick it on here, or you can just check my Facebook out. My Facebook is Marc Singer Coaching. I've got my website as well, which is Marc Singer Coaching, funny enough, as well. I'm on everything. Yeah, LinkedIn, TikTok. I do the lot. And I'm also doing my podcasts. I do my weekly show. I do a weekly show every Wednesday on Facebook, which is Wednesday at 7:30 usually. Unless I've got football that day and I have to cancel it. But no, so Wednesday every week. I'm on my 60th show now, I think. And I do like a 10-minute show, but my podcast is going to be starting next week or the week after. I've got a studio booked, so that's going to be good. And like I said, there's so many different things, speaking events and stuff coming up, which are just crazy. And so I've got loads going on, but I mean, it's just like I said to you a minute ago, it's just like snowballs from one thing to the next. And this is what happens when you work the actual process of what I work with now. Because it helps us remove those blocks and barriers which stop us moving forward, mental blocks like fear, like limiting beliefs, assumptions, and things like that. And then create a mindset where you're always living in a highly optimized sort of mindset and creating the things that you want consistently. So like I said, with my book, if you really want to check that out, check my Facebook out, and you'll find all the links. Actually, I'll tell you where the best place to go is go on my Instagram, Marc Singer Coaching, and at the top of that there's a link tree thing there. Yeah. And all my articles, all my interviews, everything I've ever done is all on there. Oh, and you'll be able to find it on there, and you can check me out, and you can link up with me from there.
So we plug the book, so that's good. So, Mark, 2 minutes left. Golden nuggets. Bit of information. What will you give to? Right. Maybe there's somebody tonight who's, been in, maybe they're in a life of crime at the moment, or maybe they've been with the police, or maybe they've got a son or a daughter that's getting into trouble, getting into gangs. I know in Swansea here a couple of weeks ago, or the other week, a young boy was stabbed 15 by 4 youths, and I don't know if he's in hospital. So say for parents, let's put it to parents then, who are worried about the youngsters getting into gangs. What could you advise?
Well, the thing is it is a difficult one, because knowing my own parents, they were obviously in despair when I was involved in what I was involved on, and everything they said to me at the time, went in there and out there. I knew best. I always knew best. And, that's the thing with you've got kids. They know best. They think they know best. Yeah. But the thing is, it's a hot potato, because especially nowadays with the kids hanging around with knives, it's so horrible. And, it's a 14-year-old can take a life in an instant. It's disgusting and it's horrible. And so the only advice you can really give is to try and help your kids see that there's something better out there. and give them motivation, build them up, empower them, make them feel good about themselves and confident. Because if you've got a kid who's not feeling confident, who's not feeling in control, and who feels that they're being pushed out in some area or element of their life, it's no good turning around to a kid and say, don't do that, or don't take drugs, or don't hang around with that one, because they just will.
Yeah.
So the way you got to do it is then to try and steer their mindset away from it in the terms of building them up, making them feel much more confident in themselves, and giving them a reason to live, giving them something to aspire to, build their interests, get them to read books, get them to broaden their intelligence, and steer them in a way and motivate them in a way which gets them away from that sort of area. So because a lot of kids get sucked into this lifestyle nowadays because of money, basically. That's a lot of the gangs. I mean, for me, it was different because it was about football, but nowadays it's about money, a lot of these kids. And so giving them some sort of something to aspire to. Don't let people make someone feel like a victim. Always empower them. That's the way I think. You tell someone they're a victim, you're just keeping them stood still in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And standing still is going backwards, as the old saying.
Exactly, that's it. I agree.
Well, I think that's really invaluable advice there. And like you say, we've all been teenagers. And if we think back to when our parents were trying to tell us not to, I certainly rebelled. And I think any parent here have done it. So yeah, embrace them, empower them, make them feel loved and enthusiastic about life and all the rest of it. Mark, we've come to the end.
That's been great. I really enjoyed it.
Wow. Okay.
Listen to my voice.
You have a lovely voice. I love your
Thank you. I appreciate it. So have you.
So, thank you so much. And what an incredible story. Maybe we'll see you on here again in the future once you've got.
It'll be my pleasure. And like I said, you come on my podcast as well when I start mine as well. You're more than I'd love to have you as a guest.
Fab. I'd love to. Yeah, lovely, jubbly. Well, we'll end it there. So that's the end of episode 7 of the Survivals of Triumph show. Tune in on Monday, 8 p.m. UK time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.